Dr. Orrin Vox screamed in agony as violent seizures racked his frail Vorta body, blood trickling from his eyes and nose. Just hours ago, the renowned xenobiologist had been standing tall, eager to unravel the secrets locked within the human soldier's genetic code. But now, as the microscopic invaders from the human's blood mercilessly ravaged Orrin's cells, the horrible truth dawned on him. He had drastically underestimated the destructive potential lurking inside these deceptively fragile creatures. Robert Howard, the last human specimen known to exist, watched stoically as the Vorta doctor collapsed, convulsing on the sterile laboratory floor. Robert had seen this all before, on Earth, before the wars that ripped his civilization apart. He'd witnessed how even the most advanced species could be felled by the tiniest of human pathogens, the microbial soldiers that had co-evolved with his kind over eons. As alarms blared and emergency medics rushed into the lab, Robert calmly surveyed the chaos, a faint smile playing on his lips. The Vorta had thought themselves superior, believing they could unlock the mysteries of humanity through force and subjugation. But they had failed to grasp the true essence of what made humans so dangerous, so indomitable. It wasn't their technology, their physical strength, or even their indefatigable spirit. It was the unseen armies coursing through their veins, the biological augmentations that could fell mere mortals and gods alike. Robert knew that he carried within him the seeds of the galaxy's salvation, or its utter annihilation. And as he met the panicked gazes of the Vorta researchers, he couldn't help but wonder which path the cosmos would choose. In the heart of the Vorta Institute's intensive care unit, a team of medics worked frantically to stabilize Dr. Orrin Vox. They quickly transferred his seizing body into a gleaming stasis pod, its translucent dome hissing shut with a pneumatic seal. A flurry of holographic displays sprang to life around the pod, monitoring every fluctuation in Orrin's vital signs as the medical team prepared to administer the experimental treatment. Dr. Zara Nix, her violet eyes focused and determined, loaded a vial of shimmering nanomedicines into the pod's injection port. With a quick gesture on the control panel, she initiated the gene therapy sequence, watching tensely as the microscopic saviors flooded into Orrin's bloodstream, beginning their battle against the devastating human virus. For days, Orrin remained in a medically induced coma, his life hanging by a gossamer thread as the nanomedicines and gene therapies worked tirelessly to repair the damage wrought by the alien pathogen. Dr. Nix maintained a constant vigil at his bedside, analyzing streams of data and adjusting the treatment protocols as needed. Finally, on the fifth day, Orrin's eyelids fluttered open, his gaze unfocused and confused. Dr. Nix leaned in closer, her voice soft but insistent. "Dr. Vox, can you hear me? You're in the ICU. We managed to neutralize the human virus, but it was a close call." Orrin's voice was raspy, his words sluggish. "The virus, the human, what happened?" As Dr. Nix filled him in on the details of his miraculous recovery, Orrin's mind raced with the implications of his brush with death. The human immune system was unlike anything he had ever encountered, robust, dynamic, and terrifyingly adaptable. He knew that unlocking its secrets could hold the key to revolutionizing Vorta medicine, or unleashing untold horrors upon the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, as Orrin regained his strength and delved deeper into his analysis of the virus, a growing sense of unease spread through the Institute. Whispers of the human threat turned to shouts, with some researchers openly advocating for the destruction of all human specimens. The once peaceful halls of the Institute became a battleground of ideas, with Orrin and Dr. Nix at the center of the storm. Late one night, as the two scientists pored over the latest batch of test results in Orrin's lab, Dr. Nix turned to him with a determined expression. "We can't let them shut this down, Orrin. The potential for understanding, for growth, it's too great. We have to keep pushing forward, no matter the consequences." Orrin nodded, his teeth gritted with determination. "I agree, Zara, but we must be cautious. The power we're tampering with, it's beyond anything we've ever known. One misstep, and we could unleash a plague that would consume the stars themselves." As the two scientists worked on into the night, the destiny of the universe hung in the balance, poised on the knife edge of their next discovery. As the Vorta Galactic Council convened in an emergency session, The holographic image of Admiral Zor Krell loomed large over the gathered representatives. His voice boomed through the chamber, imbued with a mixture of fear and righteous fury. Esteemed counselors, the human threat has metastasized into a full-blown crisis. The virus that now ravages our outer colonies bears the unmistakable signature of human genetic tampering. We must act swiftly and decisively to cauterize this wound before it festers and consumes us all. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council, punctuated by the occasional shout of, "Destroy the humans!" But Orin, his body still weakened from his brush with death, stood on shaking legs to address the assembly. "Admiral Krell, I understand your fear, but annihilation is not the answer. The virus is indeed similar to the one I encountered, but there are anomalies that suggest a more complex origin. We must study it further, unravel its secrets. Only then can we hope to find a cure." Zara stood beside him, her voice ringing with conviction. "Orin is right. This virus is not entirely human. It bears markers of Vorta genetic manipulation as well. Something else is at play here, and we must discover the truth before we condemn an entire species to death." The council erupted into chaos, with shouts of accusation and demands for immediate action filling the air. Admiral Krell's hologram flickered as he banged his head against an unseen console. "Enough! The humans are a cancer, a blight upon the galaxy. We will burn them out, root and stem, and let the ashes of their world serve as a warning to any who would threaten the Vorta race." As the council voted to approve Admiral Krell's plan for total annihilation, Orin and Zara exchanged a desperate glance. They knew that the true enemy lurked not in the stars, but in the shadowed halls of power on Vorta Prime itself. And as they raced back to their laboratories to begin the frantic search for a cure, they couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, not just for the humans, but for the entire galaxy. In the weeks that followed, Orin and Zara threw themselves into their research with a feverish intensity. They worked around the clock, analyzing the virus's genetic structure, testing potential treatments on virtual models, and scouring the Institute's vast archives for any scrap of information that might lead to a breakthrough. But even as they made progress, the situation outside the Institute's walls continued to deteriorate. The virus spread like wildfire through the Vorta colonies, leaving a trail of death and destruction in its wake. Panic gripped the populace, and riots erupted on a dozen worlds as terrified citizens demanded that their leaders take action against the human menace. Admiral Krell, seizing on the growing unrest, declared martial law across the Vorta territories and began mobilizing the military for an all-out assault on any planet suspected of harboring human survivors. Orin and Zara, watching the events unfold with growing horror, knew that they were in a race against time. Late one night, as they huddled over a holographic display of the virus's genome, Zara let out a sudden gasp. "Orin, look at this. The viral RNA, it's not just human and Vorta. There's a third component, something I've never seen before. It's almost like it was engineered to target specific genetic markers." Orin leaned in closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You're right. This isn't natural evolution. Someone designed this virus, and they did it with a specific purpose in mind. But who would have the knowledge and resources to create something like this?" As they dug deeper into the virus's origins, a chilling picture began to emerge. The genetic anomalies they had discovered bore a striking resemblance to sequences from the Institute's own research archives. Sequences that had been accessed and modified by none other than Admiral Zor Krell himself. With a sinking feeling in their hearts, Orin and Zara realized the horrifying truth. The virus was not a natural outbreak, but a deliberate attack orchestrated by the very people sworn to protect the Vorta race. And as they raced to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy, they knew that they were not just fighting for the lives of the humans, but for the soul of their own species. Orin and Zara exchanged a grim look as they stood before the reinforced containment cell housing Robert Howard. The human's piercing gaze met theirs, a mixture of curiosity and defiance etched across his features. "We need your help," Orin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The virus is spreading faster than we can contain it. Millions are at risk." Robert raised an eyebrow. And why should I care about the fate of those who imprisoned me? Zara stepped forward, her violet eyes intense. Because you're the key to stopping this. Your body has developed antibodies that can neutralize the virus. We believe we can use them to create a cure. For a long moment, Robert remained silent, weighing their words. Finally, he nodded. What do you need me to do? The next weeks were a blur of feverish activity. Oren and Zara worked tirelessly, extracting samples from Robert and synthesizing the antibodies in their lab. They ran simulations, tweaked formulas, and conducted small-scale trials on infected Vorta subjects. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Within days, the treated Vorta showed marked improvement, their symptoms receding as the engineered antibodies fought back against the virus. As Oren studied a holographic readout of the latest test results, he felt a surge of hope. Zara, look at this. The viral load in Subject 17 has decreased by 87% in just 72 hours. But their elation was short-lived. The lab's comm system crackled to life, Admiral Krell's holographic visage materializing before them. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. Dr. Vox, Dr. Nix, I've received troubling reports about your unorthodox methods. Collaborating with the human? This is dangerously close to treason. Zara stepped forward, her teeth gritted. Admiral, we're on the verge of a breakthrough. The human's antibodies... Silence! Krell's voice boomed through the lab. I'm shutting down this operation, effective immediately. As the hologram flickered out, Oren and Zara shared a look of commitment. They knew what they had to do. Under cover of darkness, they smuggled Robert and essential equipment to a forgotten sub-basement deep within the Institute. The makeshift lab was cramped and ill-equipped, but it would have to do. We'll need to accelerate production, Oren muttered, setting up a centrifuge. Robert, are you prepared for more frequent extractions? The human nodded, rolling up his sleeve. Whatever it takes. As they worked, the virus continued its relentless march across Vorta space. Reports flooded in of entire colonies falling silent, overwhelmed by the disease. The pressure mounted with each passing hour. Zara pored over data on a flickering screen, dark circles under her eyes. We're close, but the antibodies aren't replicating fast enough. We need a way to amplify their production. Robert cleared his throat. There might be a way. Back on Earth, we developed techniques to enhance our immune responses. If we could adapt that process... Oren looked up sharply. That's brilliant, but it's risky. We'd be pushing your body to its limits. Do it, Robert said firmly. We're out of options. As they prepared for the procedure, alarms blared throughout the Institute. Admiral Krell's voice echoed through the corridors, ordering a full lockdown and search. Oren's hands shook as he prepared the injection. This is it. Everything rides on this working. Robert lay back on the makeshift exam table, his eyes meeting Zara's. Whatever happens, thank you, both of you, for seeing me as more than just a specimen. The needle plunged into Robert's arm, and they held their breath, waiting to see if their desperate gamble would pay off, or doom them all. The needle plunged into Robert's arm, and for a moment the world stood still. Oren and Zara watched, breath held, as the serum coursed through the human's veins. Seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. Suddenly, Robert's body convulsed. His eyes flew open, pupils dilating wildly. It's working, he gasped, voice strained. Before they could celebrate, the lab's security system blared to life. Admiral Krell's forces had breached the Institute's outer defenses. We need to move, Zara said, already packing essential equipment. Now! Oren helped Robert to his feet, the human still unsteady from the procedure. There's an old military base, abandoned decades ago. We can set up there. They slipped out through a maintenance tunnel, emerging into the cold Vorta night. A small group of rebels awaited them, faces hidden beneath dark hoods. This way, one whispered, leading them to a waiting transport. As they sped through the outskirts of the city, Oren's mind raced. They had the beginnings of a cure, but without proper facilities, without time. The abandoned base loomed before them, a hulking silhouette against the starlit sky. Its entrance was overgrown, nature reclaiming what the Vorta had left behind. The lower levels should still be intact, Zara said, consulting an old schematic. We can set up the lab there. Days blurred into weeks as they worked tirelessly in their underground sanctuary. Robert underwent increasingly invasive procedures, his body pushed to its limits to produce the precious antibodies. We're running out of time, Oren muttered, studying a holographic map of the virus's spread. Red dots pulsed across Vorta space, each one a colony falling silent. Zara placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll make it. We have to. A commotion at the lab's entrance drew their attention. One of the rebels burst in, face pale. General Darax's forces! They've found us! The sounds of battle echoed through the corridors. Plasma fire and screams intermingled in a horrific cacophony. Get the cultures to the backup site, Oren ordered, grabbing a weapon. We'll hold them off. But as they prepared to make their stand, Robert's voice cut through the chaos. No, he said, eyes blazing with willpower. I'll buy you time. Before they could protest, the human charged towards the oncoming soldiers. Oren watched in horror as Robert used his own body to shield the precious antibody cultures from the onslaught. In the aftermath, as they fled with the secured samples, a bitter victory hung in the air. The cure was safe, but at a terrible cost. Word spread through underground networks. Hope, long extinguished, began to flicker anew. But it wasn't enough. They needed more. Then came Verena, a Vorta civilian whose body had miraculously developed its own response to the virus. Oren studied her test results, scarcely believing his eyes. This changes everything, he breathed. In a hidden facility, deep beneath the surface of a war-torn world, Oren, Zara, and Verena stood before rows upon rows of cultivation tanks. Each one hummed with potential, with the power to save billions. As the first batches of the cure left the facility, Oren allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he dared to hope. Hope. But as the cure spread across Vorta space, bringing salvation to millions, it ignited a firestorm of controversy. Oren stood before a bank of screens, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. On one, jubilant crowds celebrated their recovery. On another, angry mobs burned effigies of humans and their Vorta collaborators. It's working, Zara said, her voice tight with exhaustion and worry. But at what cost? Before Oren could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed squads of heavily armed soldiers pouring through the outer defenses. Krell, Oren growled. He's made his move. The next hours were a blur of chaos and violence. Oren and Zara coordinated the defense, their small force of loyalists fighting desperately to protect the precious cure stocks. Verena worked frantically to secure backups of their research data. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, leaving scorch marks on pristine lab equipment. The acrid smell of ozone mixed with the metallic tang of blood as bodies fell on both sides. Just as it seemed the defenders would be overwhelmed, a familiar voice crackled over the comm system. This is Captain Maya Daniels of the Earthship Defiant. We're here to help. Hold the line. A ragtag fleet of human and Vorta ships dropped out of hyperspace, laying down covering fire as dropships deployed fresh troops to the surface. Oren watched in amazement as human marines fought side by side with Vorta rebels, pushing Krell's forces back. Hours later, as the dust settled, Oren found himself face to face with Maya Daniels. The human captain's face was streaked with grime and sweat, but her eyes burned with perseverance. We need to talk, Maya said grimly. Krell's gone completely mad. He's threatening to glass entire worlds if we don't surrender the cure. Oren's mind raced, weighing options. Finally, he spoke. I have a plan, but it's risky and we'll need your help. Maya listened intently as Oren outlined his audacious gambit. When he finished, she nodded slowly. It's insane, she said, but it just might work. As Maya's team prepared for their daring assault on Krell's flagship, Oren threw himself into preparations. He assembled a mobile genetics lab, knowing they would need to work quickly once Krell was captured. The tension was palpable as they waited for word from Maya's strike team. When the comm finally crackled to life, Oren's hearts seemed to stop. "We've got him," Maya's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "But something's wrong. You need to see this." Oren and Zara raced to the docking bay, arriving just as Maya's shuttle touched down. The hatch opened, revealing a scene of horror. Admiral Krell writhed on a stretcher, his body twisting and shifting in impossible ways. "What happened?" Oren demanded, already running scans. Maya shook her head, her face pale. "He started changing as soon as we restrained him. He keeps babbling about a new evolution." Oren's blood ran cold as the test results appeared on his datapad. "This is beyond anything we've seen," he whispered. "It's not just a virus. It's rewriting his entire genetic structure." Krell's eyes snapped open, fixing on Oren with terrifying lucidity. "Help me," he rasped, "before it's too late." As Oren stared into those pleading eyes, he knew the real battle was only just beginning. The fate of not just two species, but perhaps all life in the galaxy, now hung in the balance. Oren's eyes widened as he processed the implications of Krell's transformation. The Admiral's body continued to twist and contort, flesh rippling beneath his uniform. "We need to contain him," Oren barked, snapping into action. "Maya, help me get him to the quarantine lab." As they secured Krell in a stasis field, Oren's mind raced. This was beyond anything they had encountered before. The virus wasn't just infecting cells. It was forcibly rewriting genetic code at an unprecedented rate. For days, Oren and his team worked tirelessly, analyzing tissue samples and running simulations. The results were staggering. The virus hijacked cellular machinery, accelerating evolution to a terrifying degree. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," Zara murmured, staring at a holographic model of the mutating cells. "At this rate, it could wipe out entire species in weeks." Oren rubbed his temples, fighting exhaustion. Then he noticed something peculiar in Maya's latest medical scan. "Wait," he said, enhancing the image. "Look at her cellular structure." The human cells showed subtle mutations, microevolutions occurring in real time. It was as if her body was constantly adapting to its environment. "Maya," Oren asked, "have you noticed any strange physical changes since arriving on our world?" The captain nodded slowly. "Now that you mention it, my team and I have been feeling different, stronger, more resilient. We chalked it up to the gravity difference." Oren's heart raced. "I think your bodies are naturally countering the environmental stressors. It's possible humans have evolved a genomic fluidity as a defense against viral threats." The implications were enormous. If they could harness this ability, they might have a chance against Krell's bioweapon. What followed were grueling weeks of experimentation. Oren and his team worked around the clock, testing the virus on both human and Vorta cellular samples. The results were both promising and horrifying. While Vorta cells quickly succumbed to the forced mutations, human samples showed a remarkable ability to integrate and overcome the genetic changes. However, the process was far from benign. "The metabolic stress is immense," Zara reported, reviewing the latest trial data. "It's killing most of the human test subjects." Oren stared at the readouts, his mind churning. An idea began to form, one so radical it bordered on madness. "What if," he said slowly, "we don't try to stop the mutations? What if we guide them instead?" He outlined his plan to the team. By deliberately infecting subjects with a controlled dose of the virus, then using Maya's soldiers as genetic templates, they might be able to shepherd the evolutionary process. It was a bold strategy, but with traditional treatments failing, they were out of options. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Many Vorta scientists recoiled at the very idea of such fundamental biological tampering. Even Maya looked skeptical. "You're talking about creating an entirely new species," she said, her voice tight. Oren nodded grimly. "To save both our peoples, we may have no choice." After heated debates and tense negotiations, the Vorta Council grudgingly approved what Oren dubbed the Metamorphic Protocol. The caveat, only condemned prisoners would be used as test subjects. The first volunteer was a former Vorta operative who had served under Krell. As the virus coursed through her system, Oren and his team worked feverishly to guide her cellular restructuring. For hours, they watched in a mix of fascination and horror as her body warped and twisted, Bones cracked and reformed. Organs shifted and mutated. Her agonized screams echoed through the lab. Finally, the metamorphosis stabilized. What emerged was no longer fully Vorta nor human, but something in between. A hybrid creature, grotesque yet undeniably alive. It worked, Zara breathed, running a medical scan on the unconscious subject. Her cellular structure is completely stable. The virus can't touch her now. Oren allowed himself a moment of relief before refocusing. This was only the beginning. They would need an army of these hybrids to have any hope of countering the bioweapons spread. As word of their success spread, more volunteers came forward. Entire cell blocks of prisoners underwent the protocol, each iteration refined and improved. But even as they made progress, reports from the outer colonies grew dire. The virus was spreading faster than they could produce hybrids, and tensions between humans, Vorta, and the newly created beings threatened to boil over into open conflict. Oren knew that creating the hybrids was only the first step. Now came the real challenge, uniting three disparate species against a common, existential threat. As he prepared to address the combined forces, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true war of evolution was just beginning. Oren's eyes swept across the makeshift command center, taking in the haggard faces of his team. Holograms flickered, displaying tactical maps of Krell's advancing forces. The air thrummed with tension. "It's time," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to do. "Deploy the metamorphics." Maya Daniels nodded grimly, tapping commands into her datapad. Across the battlefield, stasis pods hissed open, releasing the hybrid creatures Oren had created. They moved with eerie grace, their bodies a disconcerting blend of Vorta and human features. As the metamorphics engaged Krell's troops, their unique physiology became immediately apparent. They shrugged off toxins that left normal Vorta writhing in agony. Their mutable biology allowed them to adapt to harsh environments in real time. But the price of this power soon revealed itself. Oren watched in horror as one of the hybrids suddenly convulsed, its face contorting into a feral snarl. It turned on its allies, tearing into them with inhuman strength. "Psychotic break," Zara shouted, her fingers flying over holographic controls. "Deploying monoamine inhibitors." A fine mist enveloped the affected metamorphics. Their movements became more fluid, more coordinated, but the light of self-awareness dimmed in their eyes. Oren felt bile rise in his throat. They were no longer people, just biological weapons under his control. As the battle raged, a familiar face appeared on one of the monitors. Elenda, once a brilliant Vorta scientist, now a metamorphic hybrid. Her features were twisted, but her eyes still held a spark of intelligence. "Oren," she rasped, her voice distorted. Remember, we can help." Through Elenda, Oren discovered the metamorphic's latent telepathic abilities. He watched in awe as they moved with perfect synchronization, outmaneuvering Krell's forces at every turn. But victory came at a terrible cost. As Oren and Maya led the final assault on Krell's command station, the neural inhibitors failed. The metamorphic shock troops fell into an unstoppable frenzy. Krell, cornered and desperate, activated an electromagnetic pulse. Oren could only watch as the hybrids he had created, the beings he had exploited in the name of survival, collapsed into mindless masses of flesh. In the silence that followed, Oren stood amid the carnage, the weight of his decisions crushing down on him. The war was over, but the price of victory left him hollow. Days later, he found himself in a sterile lab, overseeing the preservation of metamorphic tissue samples. His hands shook as he sealed another container. "I did what I had to do," he whispered to himself, but the words rang hollow. Elenda approached, her movements awkward, her eyes full of an unspeakable loneliness. She was the last of her kind, cut off from the shared consciousness that had briefly existed. Oren met her gaze, seeing in it a reflection of his own haunted expression. Without a word, he turned back to his work, diving into the data from the metamorphic integration. The secrets of human adaptability lay hidden in those complex genetic structures. Oren knew he would spend the rest of his life unraveling them, driven by the hope of preventing such a conflict from ever happening again. But as he worked, the faces of those he had transformed and sacrificed haunted his every waking moment. The line between savior and monster had never seemed so thin. Oren's fingers trembled as he sealed the last sample container. The sterile lab, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a mausoleum. Elenda watched him silently, her mismatched eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. "There must be a way to help them," she said, her voice a rasp. Oren shook his head. "We can only learn from this, ensure it never happens again." Years passed. The horrors of the metamorphic war faded into history for most, but they haunted Oren's every waking moment. He threw himself into research, analyzing the complex genetic structures of the hybrid tissue samples. The interspecies medical exchange rose from the ashes of conflict. A gleaming facility of glass and chrome, it stood as a testament to cooperation between Vorta and humans. Oren walked its corridors, nodding to researchers of both species working side by side. In his office, holographic displays flickered with intricate biomolecular models. Oren manipulated them with practiced ease, mapping the pathways of human genomic fluidity. A chime at the door interrupted his work. "Come in," he called. A young Vorta woman entered, her eyes wide with scarcely controlled excitement. "Dr. Vox, I'm Alara. It's an honor to meet you." Oren studied her, seeing the same passion that had once driven him. "Welcome to the IME, Alara. Are you ready to push the boundaries of xenobiology?" Alara nodded eagerly. "I've been studying your work on human stem cell behaviors. I believe we can apply similar principles to drive Vorta infertility issues." A spark of interest flickered in Oren's eyes. "Show me." Months blurred into years as Oren mentored Alara. Her brilliance shone through in every experiment, every breakthrough. Together, they unlocked secrets that had eluded generations of scientists. But success bred resentment. Xenophobic factions whispered of human corruption, of Vorta purity being tainted. Threats arrived at the IME with increasing frequency. Oren found Alara working late one night, her face illuminated by holographic projections. "You should go home," he said gently. "It's not safe here after hours." Alara shook her head stubbornly. "I'm close to a breakthrough. I can feel it." The explosion rocked the building moments later. Oren's world dissolved into smoke and screams. When he regained consciousness, Alara lay motionless nearby, her body broken and bleeding. "No," Oren whispered, cradling her head. "Not again." In desperation, he used experimental treatments derived from his metamorphic research. Ilara's wounds closed before his eyes, but something else was happening. Her cells vibrated with unnatural energy. Ilara's recovery seemed miraculous at first, but as days passed, Oren noticed troubling changes. Her senses sharpened beyond Vorta norms. Her stamina grew exponential. Her mind raced with calculations and theories that left even him struggling to keep up. In the privacy of his lab, Oren ran test after test. The results chilled him to his core. Ilara's DNA was rewriting itself, guided by an unseen hand. It incorporated human traits, yes, but also something else, something alien and utterly unknown. "What's happening to me?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling as she examined her changing reflection. Oren met her gaze, seeing not just his protege, but the key to a mystery that spanned galaxies. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we're going to find out." As Ilara's transformation accelerated, Oren worked feverishly to understand and control it, but with each passing day, he felt more like an observer than a scientist. Whatever force drove Ilara's metamorphosis, it was beyond his comprehension. The final stage came without warning. Ilara collapsed, her body contorting in agony. Oren could only watch, helpless, as she underwent a transformation more profound than anything he had witnessed before. When it was over, the being that emerged was neither Vorta nor human. Ilara stood before him, her form a harmonious blend of species, radiating an otherworldly presence. "Oren," she said, her voice resonating with newfound power, "I understand now." As Oren stared at his creation, or was she his creator, he realized that his life's work had led him to a precipice. The true nature of evolution, of life itself, lay just beyond his grasp, and Ilara held the key. "Show me," he whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. Alara smiled, a gesture both familiar and alien. Are you ready to see beyond the veil, Orin? To understand the true destiny of our species? Of all species? Orin hesitated, the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. But his scientist's curiosity, the drive that had defined his entire existence, won out. He nodded. As Alara began to reveal the cosmic truths hidden within her transformed mind, Orin knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The boundaries between species, between past and future, were about to blur in ways he could never have imagined. Orin's hand trembled as he touched Alara's transformed skin. It hummed with an otherworldly energy, neither warm nor cold, but vibrating on a frequency he couldn't quite comprehend. The cosmos. Alara's voice resonated, her eyes unfocused. It's all connected, Orin. We're part of something so much larger. As days passed, Orin meticulously documented every aspect of Alara's metamorphosis. Her physiology defied classification, a perfect fusion of Vorta and human traits with something entirely new woven through her genetic code. During their neural interface sessions, Alara's mind overwhelmed the most advanced quantum processors. Streams of data flowed faster than Orin could analyze, hinting at revelations beyond his grasp. But the strain took its toll. Alara convulsed, her eyes rolling back as visions gripped her. "They're coming," she gasped, clawing at the air. "Architects of life, weavers of galaxies." Orin held her, helpless as she thrashed. "Who, Alara? What do you see?" Her unfocused gaze locked onto his. "Our creators, Orin, and they're not finished with us." The weight of her words settled like lead in Orin's stomach. He glanced at the lab's matter disintegrator, considering the unthinkable. One press of a button could erase Alara from existence, eliminating any threat she might pose. His finger hovered over the controls, but he couldn't bring himself to activate it. He saw not just his protege, but the daughter he never had, the key to unlocking the greatest mysteries of the universe. Before Orin could decide, alarms blared through the facility. Security feeds showed armed figures swarming the corridors, their uniforms bearing the insignia of a radical anti-alien faction. "We have to go," Orin urged, helping Alara to her feet. They fled through maintenance tunnels, the sounds of combat echoing behind them. But as they reached the vehicle bay, a stun bolt caught Orin in the back. He crumpled, watching helplessly as masked figures dragged Alara away. "No," he cried, reaching out as consciousness faded. Orin awoke in the IME's medical bay, his body aching. Maya Daniels stood at his bedside, her expression grim. "They took her," Orin rasped. Maya nodded. "We've tracked them to a black site facility on the outer rim, but we'll need help to get her back." Orin pushed himself up, ignoring the pain. "Whatever it takes." They assembled a strike team, the best of both Vorta and human operatives. Together, they infiltrated the hidden base, fighting through waves of fanatical defenders. As they neared the central chamber, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Admiral Zor Krell, somehow alive and more terrifying than ever. "Did you think death could stop me, Orin?" Krell sneered. "Alara is the key to my ascension, to our dominion over all life in this galaxy and beyond." Orin raised his weapon, but Krell was faster. A burst of energy sent Orin flying back, crashing into delicate equipment. As Krell gloated, preparing to finish Orin off, the air crackled with power. Alara rose from her restraints, her body pulsing with otherworldly energy. "No more," she said, her voice echoing with cosmic power. The fabric of reality tore open behind her, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries and beings beyond comprehension. Alara turned to Orin, her eyes filled with sorrow and purpose. "I understand now," she said, "my place, my role in what's to come." Orin reached out, but the distance between them was more than physical. "Alara, wait!" She shook her head. "Thank you for everything, Orin, but I have to go alone." With a final, sad smile, Alara stepped into the rift. Orin lunged forward, knowing he couldn't follow, but desperate to keep her tethered to this world. His fingers brushed hers for a fleeting moment. Then she was gone, the portal collapsing behind her. Krell howled in fury, But his cries were cut short as the cascading energies consumed him. The facility began to crumble around them. As Maya dragged Orin to safety, his mind reeled with the implications of what he'd witnessed. Alara was gone, but the questions she left behind would haunt him for the rest of his days. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and alliances shifted, Orin stood at the viewport of the IME, staring out at the vast expanse of space. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, Alara continued her journey. And he would spend every remaining moment of his life trying to understand the cosmic tapestry she had glimpsed.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.